Okay.
Whenever you're ready, Johan.
Okay. All right. It's 6 p.m., October 9th. And this meeting has been officially called to order. I want to welcome everyone to the Sustainability Committee meeting. It's been a while, and to all those listening from around the world, welcome as well. Let's see. With us, we have council members Goldstein, Smith, Najelski, Eichner, Shanahan, and myself. So we have a quorum. Next item of the agenda is acceptance of the meeting notes from April 10th. Do I have a motion? Thank you, Councilman Shanahan. Any corrections? Seeing none, hearing none, all in favor?
Johan, don't forget about
Yes.
public participation.
Yes, I'll do it right after. Okay, should I
Sorry,
do it
okay.
before or does it, or?
On the agenda, we have it before the minutes.
Okay, so we can do that first. That's fine, that's fine. Yeah, okay, so do we have anyone that would like to address the committee?
I haven't received any emails and nobody has raised their hand.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so now moving on to the next item on the agenda is acceptance of the minutes from April 10th. Can I have the motion? Thank you, Councilman Shanahan. Any corrections, deletions, or omissions? Seeing none, hearing none, all in favor? Excellent, so thank you so much. So next item on the agenda is a presentation by our friend Florian from Van Dyke Recycling. We're excited. And just to kind of quickly let the public know also that the committee is working on formulating a plan to address some of the goals that are outlined in our climate action plan. So education and public engagement is one of those objectives, and hopefully going forward, we'll have more of these reoccurring education presentations as we move forward. And if anyone from the community has any questions, concerns, or recommendations, you can feel free to email me directly. So with that said, I will turn it over to you, Florian.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, guys. So we're going to run today through a presentation about MRFs. Those MRF stands for Material Recovery Facilities. These are essentially large recycling plants that take what's in your blue bin, that separates them, and then our clients who buy these systems sell your trash. And so we're involved in the separation technology. We're based out of Norwalk, Connecticut. We sell equipment all over the world and especially North America. But we're going to run today about how technology is shaping recycling and kind of what happens at these places, so everyone can better understand a little bit of the process. And yes, that recycling happens, and it happens in lots of places, and it's becoming better and better each day. So I'm going to make sure I can move on. So just a little bit about Van Dyke Recycling Solutions, right? We have sort of our mission statement up there, but really that second point is what we do. We separate what you throw away, creating commodities to be sold and reused or recycled in the circular economy. So it's a big asset that people want to talk about. They want to make sure that what they're buying is then getting sort of recirculated and turns into a new product, or and happens as much as possible. We've been here since my father immigrated from the Netherlands in 1984. We've done 2,200 projects. We have 262 balers in operation. We've sold 450. And something we'll talk about, like optical sorting, is getting big as well. You can see in that photo a little bit of what these places look like. So the types of recycling streams that we work in, right? We have residential recycling, that's you at home. Some people, like in New York City, still have dual stream. Put your paper and your cardboard in one bin, and you put your bottles and cans in another. That used to be more widespread. Now what we call is a single stream, that's just that one blue bin where you throw all your recyclables together. We do all sorts of other sort of recycling as well. Organics is going to be big. Municipal solid waste is just extracting recyclables from garbage. And there's also, commercial and C&D, construction and demolition recycling, that we work in as well. So just a little bit of an idea of where we are. All those red flags that you see is where we have customers and clients. And so you can see a little bit where our service technicians are. We have 42 of those people. They're the ones that build those images that you saw. And so we have 400 of these across the world, and we have phone support, but you can kind of see where the population is, right? We don't actually have a lot in Montana and the Dakotas. There's just not a lot of population there. So there's not a lot of people throwing away trash. But we consider ourselves a market leader in this field, and we're based out of Norwalk, and we're super proud of that. So moving forward, our headquarters here. So this used to be the old Beiersdorf building. This was purchased from them about 11 years ago. And you can see this 288,000 square foot property. Buildings 10 and 11 we rent out. Some people know building as 11 as Sky Zone, which is really popular with the kids on weekends and snowy and rainy days. But most of our admin is between building 4 through 9, and then actually 1, 2, 3 is still available. So if people are looking to rent, office space or warehouse space, please let us know. But we're right here in Norwalk, kind of down right before you get to Rowayton, kind of near the Wilson Cove, kind of past the UPS. So right in town. And we also have what we think is the largest recycling test center in the world for our clients. Before they make, $1 million investments in this machine, we'll send a bag of waste to us. We'll test it. We'll say, hey, this is what it could look like. We've heard that there was one before in Germany. So if someone in America wanted to test something, you had to ship it to Europe, and it's actually really hard to ship trash without certain permits. So we think it's the only one in the Western Hemisphere and the largest in the world, and that's in Norwalk, which is really cool. But we also have some people, big companies, Coca-Cola, Unilever, they come by and they test their products to make sure they're recyclable. And then they can confidently put on their bottles and cans like this is recyclable, which is cool as well. So just an example of some of our bigger systems. This is in New York City. This is Balcones, or it used to be called Sims. They do 1,800 tons a day. It's probably one of the largest in the world. It is unique in that New York City is dual stream, and this facility only takes in the bottles and cans. So if you are in New York City and you throw a bottle or can away, it will end up at one of our systems. From here, those will all get separated. You can see some of the detergent bottles in the bottom left there, but you can see how intricate these are. Those orange boxes you see are the optical sorters, which automatically shoot air at objects to separate them. But we'll get into kind of all that and more. So my father always tells this story. There used to be, a long time ago, 2 bins that you would throw your stuff away, dual stream, and you would have 2 trucks that would have to come by, and they would pick up your 2 separate recyclables. And then eventually there was a push by the haulers, instead of having to go to the same address, twice in a week or 4 times in a week, to just go at once and pick everything up in one bin. The paper mills, the people that took the paper thought, oh my God, my glass and bottles and all that stuff's going to be mixed in with my paper. I don't want to take that paper from these places. Like, I don't want this. Ultimately, the haulers won, and single stream was adopted essentially all across the world. And that's where we get these large blue bins that we see. In theory, I would probably say this is a good thing. It is increased recycling. So people know it used to be, the rates of 20% of the objects that we'd consume would find their way to a MRF, and now it's closer to 50%. It doesn't mean that all that stuff is actually recycled. Some of it just gets reused once, but each and every decade, the recycling numbers are actually getting better, and the technology is getting better as well. But also the stream is changing. So in 2005, your pile of waste looks something like this. So you can obviously see a lot of newspaper, a fair amount of glass. You can see smaller percentage of plastics. This is by weight, and not a lot of cardboard. Now, if you look at 2024, we're going to start going down the line, and we don't have time for this right now, but I want you to kind of in your mind guess what you think they are, because cardboard is now 30% of the waste stream. It is just an enormous percentage of what is ending up in our waste. Newspaper has gone down to 0%, right? That's obviously because, newspapers are not nearly as popular anymore. Mixed paper has actually increased because now all that paper is sort of mixed, right? But just a big swing towards cardboard. The rest of the numbers are actually relatively similar percentage-wise. Outside of residue, because we put everything in one bin, people got a little bit more ambitious with what they're throwing away. And we just have more residue and just stuff that does not belong in bins there compared to what it used to be. So we're going to talk about a bunch of crises, and we're going to go through a bunch of them, and then we're going to kind of talk about how we adjusted for those. But this is something we call like the Amazon effect, right? This company is so big and so disruptive to our world. And maybe it's a good thing, right? Cardboard is something that can be recycled, and the paper mills like that product. So there's just a lot more of it on the streets, and there's a lot more of it ending up on our waste streams. And there's also something that we call wish cycling, which is where like you think something is recyclable, but it's actually not. And also there's some confusion, right? The rules change, they get tighter, they get looser, right? So naturally people get a little, befuddled by what's going on, and then they end up not really trying. They sort of become apathetic. But it's important to kind of continually be on that and kind of know what you can throw away. And also, like, you have brands that have like an aluminum can, and then they wrap it in like a plastic wrapper because they want to put a logo on it. Now I have a piece of plastic with a piece of aluminum, and like I can't really separate that when they're glued to each other, right? So kind of keeping products homogeneous is important. But look, brands want to kind of have their stuff pop, so we'll talk about that as well. There's also an aging equipment crisis, right? A lot of these facilities that we're going to talk about were built in 2002 to 2012. They were built for those percentages that I showed you. Those have changed over time. They're being overwhelmed with cardboard. They're not prepared for all the glass. And so that's also an issue that we're facing. I would say, right, Norwalk was built in about, or City Carding, where Norwalk material goes to, in Stamford, that was built in 2014, and it's relatively state of the art. It's, you know, getting a little bit older in age, but it still can handle the waste that's coming in. So it's important, right, to not operate a 2005 system with 2018 input. There's more trash, there's more film, there's more glass, there's more, you know, 3D objects, and the objects have also gotten lighter over time. And so, right, less newspaper, a lot more cardboard boxes. You have, you know, paper going to iPads. You have flexible packaging. You have stuff that used to be like a rigid plastic is now a softer plastic. The recyclers like the rigid plastics more than they do the soft plastics. It's easier for us to recycle. It's easier for them to turn into new products. And you can see this sort of flexible packaging as well. We prefer, right, the standard cardboard box, but some of it comes in this stuff where it has multiple different types of plastic to it. And that's just harder to separate from each other because those are just one thing all of a sudden. You know, there's also just a lot more plastic. Plastic gets a little bit of a bad rap. It is incredibly useful. It has an enormous utility. You can fill it with water and walk it somewhere and then, you know, feed your family with it. That doesn't really happen in our country, but just in general, like you go to the store and your stuff is in a plastic bag because it doesn't contaminate the food, right? It doesn't work the same way like paper does or fiber does. So it's incredibly useful, and there's just more of it in the stream, and it's also gotten a lot lighter. It's a lot thinner, right? Our Poland Spring bottle, it's just a little dense at the top, and the rest of it is super thin. So these are just things we have to consider. And moving on to the inbound stream crisis, this is the crisis that you are causing, right? The people. So you know, wish cycling, right? It's like, I'm not sure that this, you know, little film bag that I got is recyclable, so I'm just gonna, you know, put in the recycling bin. And in reality, right, it should have belonged in a landfill. It's more arduous on our systems to handle that. There's no value in the object that you're trying to recycle, so the guy selling your trash doesn't want it either. And so it's just bad for us. And you know, you have wacky items. You have stuff like a stroller, which has plastic and it has metal, which are both recyclable, but when they're welded together, right? Like I'm not separating that at one of these systems, right? So that is not recyclable, but it has, you know, recycled products in it. So then they just throw it in, and that's also a problem. And then film, right? It's good that those grocery stores don't have those thin plastic bags anymore. Our systems just don't handle them well, and they just don't have a good value to them. They're just, you need thousands of bags to make a new bag. You only need a couple of aluminum cans to make a new aluminum can. So a little bit more about the film. If you look at the numbers, right, let's say 1.5% of an inbound waste stream is just film bags. But you know, you look at 1 pound of film bags is 75 bags, and we have over 1,000 pounds of film bags an hour. That's just like a crazy amount of bags, right? 78,000 bags per hour, right? So it's not something that we want. They also wrap everywhere. So these are some of our screens. We've adjusted our designs a little bit, but they're just hard to handle, right? So they just have little value. Try not to use them. Try to reuse objects, but again, right, they're very useful to many of us in other ways in many industries. So they're never going to go away. These are probably the two most important crises that I'll talk about in terms of like MRFs and recycling, and also a big thing for communities and you guys to understand as well. It used to be that you could sort of send everything to China. You could have really dirty paper at the end of your line and just send it to China. Overnight, you know, China said, like, our rivers are so dirty, like, we cannot handle this. And so they stopped and they cut that off. And they didn't just kind of accept any sort of trash from all over the world. Now recyclers, like the one in Stamford that takes Norwalk's trash, has to make a cleaner product, and they can't rely on selling everything. So their economic model of paying Norwalk to then take in their trash to then sell, that became sort of economically non-viable. They weren't making any money anymore. That didn't work out. They didn't get enough in for the price that they got out because they needed to get a really high quality. And so Eventually, they started charging communities for this waste, and that sort of turned everything on its head because municipalities were used to getting paid, and now they had to pay. And so that was a big issue for them. And with budgets already tight after the next crisis that we'll talk about, COVID, right, it just made it difficult. But ultimately, right, you need to get a good quality product. You can't just ship off all your residue to China and get a little bit of money for it. And this is a big thing that happened in 2018. And then lastly, the COVID-19 crisis, right, which affected everything. Manual labor for quality control became incredibly expensive. It wasn't available. People were working from home. You needed more automation. You needed more machines. Before you had a 50-ton-an-hour system, and you had 50 people on the line just doing everything by hand. Now we have a lot more optical sorters and robots and machines and scanning systems to kind of essentially make it easier on the operators of these MRFs, of these recycling facilities, to make a profit by processing your waste. Keep going here. So it's time to automate and retool. And as we like to say, optical sorters are the sexy products that are now out there. As you can see, it travels on a belt at a high speed, and it scans down with the camera, and that camera reflects, okay, this is an object, and it reads it back to that camera. And about a foot later, we say, okay, this is a piece of paper, and I want to separate it from all the cardboard that's in there. And I'm going to shoot a little piece of air at it. The paper goes a little bit further, travels on one conveyor belt, and the cardboard doesn't get shot, and it falls down. And so then the two conveyors go separate directions, and that's how we do some of our separations. Now you look at robots, that's the super sexy item. It's new, but it's also, to be honest with you, just really kind of replacing a person. They're not as fast as opticals. People got a little bit maybe too excited about them, that they were going to save everything. But there is a place for them in our industry, and like many other industries, they're going to be helpful in automating kind of the process. And then lastly, everyone wants to talk about AI because that is just the sexiest thing that's out there. And that's also happening to these systems. We're understanding more, a little bit of what's in our streams, and AI is kind of helping.
This is a sweet AI reference. I appreciate the hell out of this.
Thank you.
One basketball fan to another,
So it's one of those things where all this technology that's happening in other industries is absolutely happening in recycling as well. And so we have vision systems that are understanding exactly what's on the belt and exactly what's coming in from these communities to kind of better inform operators on how to run these facilities and what's in there. So, a lot of people ask us, well, can I just drop in this piece of equipment and then all my problems are solved? And that's not exactly true, right? Van Dyke Recycling spends a lot of time taking your waste and separating it all so that an optical sorter or that a person can separate it easily. We want the 2D objects with the 2D objects. We want the 3D bottles and cans with the other cans, right? We want the ferrous over one way. We want the large stuff over one way. We want the small stuff out of the way as well. So sort of homogenizing each material and then feeding it in a single layer is really important, because, what would a robot or an optical sorter do with this, right? And this is kind of what your dumpster might look like, right? So it's really important that we separate that all. We feed it in an even layer. We open up the bags. We kind of allow people to kind of have a chance at separating this stuff automatically. So how do we do that? We have these screens that we call them, right? We separate things by size. As you've seen, we've increased the size of the shaft so that a plastic film bag can't actually get all the way around the shaft. So that wrapping that I showed you is no longer as much of an issue. But again, right, film, there's really just no value in it. So it should belong in the landfill. But you can see how, you can separate large items from other items. You can see over a long time period of running, there's no wrapping, so there's less maintenance. So the operators can charge you a better price because they're not spending all their money on labor hours. So we have splitter screens that works a little bit the same way. And when we also have, I think it's going to try to show you video, but we also have ballistic separators, as we also call them. We have one of these in Norwalk. It looks like an elliptical. And what happens is that 2D objects will sort of ride up it. And then you see those little ridges in that middle photo. While it's sort of bouncing, a 3D object will hit that ridge and over time start to bounce back. So this is what we call a sort of 2D, 3D separator. And it looks a little bit like chaos, but over time you start to see just the 2D go on one side and the 3D go on another. And then also we have little holes in the middle. So any dust, any grit, any sand, right, that can also kind of get out. And that's a third fraction that we get from this piece of equipment. We have disc spreaders, right? We want to, use that belt that we have going to the optical sorter to be kind of even across the whole width of the belt. So this sort of spreads everything out so we get a better scan and a better shot. We also have vibratory feeders, so material that's in a clump sort of shakes and then it evens out into an even layer. We have conveyor belts and sequencing and large systems. And what Van Dyke spends time doing is like, okay, this piece of equipment goes in front of this one, in front of this one, in front of this one, right? And so then we get an even separation of material over time. We'll separate the 2D and the 3D, and then on the 2D shoot out paper from cardboard. And then on the 3D, we'll do a magnet and an eddy current to separate the ferrous bottles and the aluminum cans, and then have an optical sorter shoot out the different kinds of plastics. And then it ends up looking a little bit like what you see here. We have wind tunnels for our objects that are about to get scanned. If it's traveling at 3 meters per second and we blow a piece of air at 3 meters per second, that thing sort of falls down. So when it gets scanned, it doesn't fly away, and then the shot sort of shoots elsewhere and misses that object. And then lastly, I just wanted to talk about optical sorter advancements. These are becoming big. They were introduced in 2005. And we have, all sorts of applications for them, but increasingly these facilities will have like 20 of them in one system, right? So it can just do what 12 human beings can do as quickly as they can do it and more accurately. So just, finally, some good news right on the horizon, right? We're able to process a high volume of tons. This is a little bit more than Norwalk's. Norwalk's is about 25, or Stanford's, where Norwalk's material goes to. That's about 25 tons an hour. And this one does 40 tons an hour in Houston. It only has 7 people on it. It has 15 of those optical sorters that we talked about. And there's also one right here in Connecticut. This recycling MRF won, MRF Facility of the Year. And that was for 2023. It does 50 tons an hour. It only has 10 people on the line. It has 13 optical sorters. I think they just added 2 more. So this is something to be really proud of. I think I actually have a video here. I'm just going to play it for you guys. Can you see that? Okay. So this is in Connecticut. This is near Hartford, and this processes most of their waste. You can see we have 2 infeeds coming in. This is a little bit of the look of the system from the inside. This is that screen that I told you about in the beginning. Take a look at the brown pieces. Those are the larger pieces of cardboard, and eventually they'll sort of float to the top. And so right from the beginning, we usually separate the big stuff, and the smaller stuff that you see here falls underneath that screen. So that's just a size separator. Now we're looking at something that does 2D, 3D separation. The 2D goes to the fiber side, and the 3D goes to the bottles and can side. That's that optical sorter, right? It sees it, reads it, and shoots on it really, really quickly. And then you'll see kind of the end product. We have essentially just some white paper here. We have some mixed paper here where maybe there's a little bit of cardboard, and then an absolute 50-50 split. We actually made an improvement to Berlin, so that's a little bit different. And then we also have our container line where there's no people. Everything is done automatically with machines. There's the elliptical that we talked about, the 3D objects going one way, the 2G objects going up. That goes to a magnet. Anything that's magnetic gets sucked up. Then it goes to an aluminum eddy current, where the eddy current gets sort of propelled away from everything else. And so it's all about separating these items so that they're homogeneous in their little pools. And this really happens, right? Like if you're in Hartford and you throw something in the recycling away, like it's going to go here and it's going to get separated and it's going to go to the right pile and it's going to get sold. So we shoot on everything and then we clean it up, right? Where we shoot on everything again, just to make sure it's super, super clean. And we have cleaned PET, clean PP, and clean HDPE. So for you guys at home, those are numbers 1, 2, and 5. Those are really important to recycle, right? You can recycle all the numbers, but 1, 2s, and 5s are the ones that have a good commodity value. So those are the ones that you would want to throw away most often. This material then, after it goes into one big bin, and it's all just the paper that you see here, we'll go to what we call a baler. This was our original product. This is what my father came to this country. He only sold the baler, and sorting systems all came later. But all the material gets squeezed super, super tight into what we call a bale, like a little cube. You can see the aluminum right there. You can see the milk cartons, the HDPE, your number 2s right there. This is the colored bales right here of your detergent bottles. This is just better for shipping. So this will go off to China or Vietnam or somewhere else in the United States. And whoever that is will then take that product, shred it, wash it, and then turn it into a new product. And people always ask me like, well, what happens to my waste, right? And to be honest with you, I don't actually always know, right? There are 1,000 different applications of what could happen to your bottle, right? Your plastic bottle could turn into a rug. It can turn into a new bottle. It can turn into like a piece of furniture. It could turn into, all sorts of things. Right. So it could also end up in the landfill, right? Like maybe it was a little too dirty. But moving on, I have one last crisis to tell you about, and I kind of just want to warn you. This is something that the recycling industry just has not figured out yet. And that's the lithium ion battery crisis. So batteries, whether they're in toys or they're in bikes or there's in pens, right? Like there's just so many of them out there. And what happens is that when it sits in a pile, it creates friction, and that friction can spark. And you can see like in this top left photo, like there's a lot of recycling facilities that have burned down, right? And people buy these $1 million systems from us and they build this all up. And then 2 years into it, a little bit of lithium ion battery ends up in the paper pile, and then it just ignites and the whole thing, it gets on fire, right? So detecting them and then pulling them out is tricky because they're just everywhere, right? Like we'd have to stop the system every 2 minutes to pull out all the batteries that are in there. A lot of them pass through without any issue, but there's way too many of them in the stream. And the only thing that we can really do is educate the people to just not throw these in the recycling or, in the landfill at best, but they don't want them either, right? They really do need to go to specific e-waste spots. And so that's kind of the next crisis. We've been able to solve the other ones, but this one, we kind of just essentially need the consumer help. So that's kind of the next thing. And thanks, guys. That's my presentation about recycling, what happens.
Florian, thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. That's actually very informative. It's very exciting, very cool to see the entire process. So I'll open up the questions. I have a few questions. In the meantime, so in terms of like providing some general industry context, like given the market fluctuations for recyclable commodities, have you noticed any significant changes or trends in the circular model? Like with respect to, let's say, real quick, like let's say product life extensions, ongoing advancements in technology when it comes to like maybe chemical recycling and converting plastics to waste, the use of blockchain technology, anything that you can think of that you've really observed that is pretty significant.
Yeah, look, the end markets determine how recycling goes, right? Like the price of cardboard is high right now, so all our fiber guys are doing pretty well, right? There's just demand. Christmas is coming. They need to make more products. They need to make more boxes, right? And so that sort of drives the price of OCC, which makes these facilities more profitable, which, it just helps everything. But there's different ways to recycle. There's mechanical recycling that you talk about, literally physically turning one product into another product. There's also chemical recycling, where you break it down sort of to the molecular level, and then you make sort of a new product out of that. And that's a lot more expensive. We have yet to see that succeed at scale. A lot of people like to talk about it because it's wonderful, right? Oh, you can, take your plastic and convert it into fuel. But let's face it, guys, like, even if this does work, like 0.1% of our fuel will be made from recycled plastic. And it's a little bit of a greenwash, right? They're just saying, oh, some of our fuel is made from recycled plastic, but it's like a very small amount and it's very expensive to do. So still mechanical recycling is the dominant one. But look, if the technology gets better and we start chemically recycling all this stuff too, that's great. But fiber and OCC and paper going to a paper mill and turning into a new, sheet of paper that gets turned into whatever, right? That's great. That's easy. It's simple. It's still not that simple, but pyrolysis and all that sort of stuff. It's a little bit more flash in the pan from what I've noticed than being an actual reality just yet.
Okay, thank you so much, Ron. A quick follow-up, in terms of like the optical sorting machines, I presume the technology behind it is convolutional neural networks, like really to be able to pinpoint exactly to process the images, to classify the images, and use sort of things like textures, colors to be able to, in the end, be able to classify them. I'm assuming that's like the tech behind those optical sorting machines.
To be more specific, it's near infrared, right? So if I shine something on an object, that object has a certain reflection that comes back off of it based on its physical properties. And so that infrared signal that it gives off gets communicated back to the optical, and then it can usually detect it. There are other detections as well. Some of it's just color. It's called viz, right? If there's like just a certain color we want to shoot out, we can do it based off of that as well, right? The paint, the pigment that's on there. Or, right, like a black object, we shine a light at it, a carbon black object absorbs all the light. So then we put a laser on the belt, the laser is flush to the belt, but then notices that there's an object there. So then there's a little bump on the laser, but the near infrared and the vis didn't pick it up. But the laser's like, hey, there's something there. So then we're like, okay, that's a black object. And that's usually PP number 5, and we shoot that with the PP number 5. So there's the opticals are really advanced, and there's all sorts of ways they do the sorting, but mostly it's near infrared.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm not sure if Councilmember Shanahan or Goldstein was next.
Lisa was next.
Okay, so.
Great. Florian, that was an amazing presentation. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much. And we're so proud to have Van Dyke in Norwalk and the great work that you guys are doing. So sometimes I really want to get to the very, customer level type of conversation. And so some of the things that we've been trying to do is help our residents know exactly how to do their recycling. So some common questions are, can you put it in the white plastic bags, or should they not go in? Or how clean do we have to get our plastic or glass? Can you help us with some of those very consumer level? I know that we need to do some battery conversation, but how about some of the, how clean does my recycling have to be, and how should I dump it?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And I can probably go back to that original slide I had about all the projects. But one of the things you mentioned, and I hear this a lot, like, do I need to wash like my yogurt cup or my plastic cup, right? Really what I would do and recommend is like take like a paper towel or something, right? And you could use water if you wanted to, but like just wipe out the organics. Make sure that it is free of the organic content, either if it's liquid or if it's yogurt or what it might be. Make sure that is out of it, and then you can recycle it. You don't necessarily always have to wash those items, right? If it's just clean and then there's no like actual food or something in there, that's usually okay. Now, I'm not going to discourage you from washing it, right? It's better, right? But it also goes into a truck and it gets squeezed together with a bunch of other trash, right? Like it probably is going to end up a little bit dirty, right? If everyone had really dirty stuff they threw away, that'd also be bad. If everyone had really clean stuff, right? That'd be really nice. But most importantly, just what I do, I take a paper towel, just one sheet, I just wipe the inside of it, toss that in the garbage can, and then I take the empty bottle and put it away as well. In terms of stuff that you can do at home and just knowing what you should throw away, like aluminum cans are really important, plastic bottles are really important. Try not to put them in bags, right? That thin plastic, that no one really wants that. And there's all these places that are going to try to take thin film and do that sort of chemical recycling process, and then there's actually value for it. But as of today, 2024, right, there's no value in thin film. They're looking for the rigid plastics. They're looking for your detergent bottles, your Poland Spring bottles, and your yogurt cups, right? 1s, 2s, and 5s. Those are the ones that they're looking for, the rigid stuff. The thin stuff, to be honest with you, it should just go in the landfill. Right. So really just take that garbage bag that you have. What I do when I go to my recycling, I sort of dump it and then I hold on to the plastic bag. I let all that stuff sort of fall out independently and then I put it away. That's not mean to say like, oh, I have this plastic bag and I just can't, throw it away. Like some places, New York City, they can handle plastic bags. They have a bag opener at the beginning of the system. So all that stuff gets sort of broken open. That's not at every spot. That's not what it is in Montauk, New York, where it's just like a smaller community and that waste doesn't go there, right? So it's dependent a little bit on where you live, but some of those things are true. And lastly, what I'll say is bottle caps. There's a big confusion. What do I do? Do I take it off? Do I put it on? Take your bottle, make sure to empty it. That's probably the most important thing you can do. Squeeze it a little bit so that it's not round. You don't have to squeeze it flat, but just squeeze it a little bit and then put the bottle cap back on and then recycle it. The reason for that is actually at the top of the bottle is actually where the thicker plastic is. That's what the plastic recycler is really looking for. And they want that cap. They like that. What they do, they take these bottles, they line them all up. I don't know exactly how they do it, but it's all standing up and then they chop off the heads because that's where like the thick plastic is. And so they want that bottle cap. Also, the reason that we don't want it full, like, those vitamin water bottles and those Gatorade bottles that are a little stronger, if it's rolling on the belt, like I showed you, and it gets scanned and it keeps rolling, by the time then it hits the valve block where the air shoots at it, it might be in a different spot. So I usually just squeeze it a little bit and then close it. I don't want to squeeze it flat, right? Because then it might go over a screen and it might identify as a 2D product, not a 3D product. So there's give and take with some of these things that we do, but those are just some helpful tips.
Thank you. That's really helpful. It's a little bit of the art of recycling. Thank you. And I hate to do this to you, but I hope that you'll allow me to invite the rest of the Common Council to come and take a tour at Van Dyke, because it's just so exciting to see it. And I think people would really enjoy it. So if you don't mind, I'll follow up with that.
Okay.
Great. Thanks.
Councilman Goldstein?
Thank you. I agree with Lisa said that was a really fantastic presentation, not just because of the Allen Iverson reference, but also really thorough. I just want to get a sense of, since there is a move to in so many industries to AI and to sort of automated machinery, I want to get a sense of who's in your workforce, like who is actually operating on a day-to-day basis, how many employees are there, just sort of a rundown on like who's making this thing run.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So look, we don't operate the equipment. We design and install and provide service, but our clients are the ones who operate these facilities. And let's say, for example, Wind Waste in Stamford, Connecticut, which used to be known as City Carting, and that's where Fairfield County and some of Westchester and some of upstate New York, that's where that material goes to.
Right.
So that facility probably has like 25 people working operationally on the facility, and probably like 80 total, right? You got to consider the truck drivers, right? The ones that come by your house, management, people in the office, marketing people, the people that sell the product, the people that make contracts with the cities, right? There's a lot of people that are involved in this.
Right.
To be honest with you, it's also like they're just people that hand sort trash, right? You might shoot something on an optical, and then you just want to double check right before it goes into the bin, like, is that as clean as possible? And you just have a person there. And you know, a lot of those people are immigrants. It's not like the most glamorous job, but it's a really important and valuable job. Those people actually make, you know, $18, $20 an hour at some of these places, right? So they make, you know, sometimes minimum wage too, but you know, it's it's a large operation that has, you know, a non-negligible operational expense. A lot of what we're seeing today and a lot of our requests are, let me do more production. I want to do more tonnage with less people, right? They're just like, I just want as many machines to do it, right? Because anyone's biggest operating expense is people, right? So because it's not the most glamorous job, right? The machine can do it better and faster, and it, you know, doesn't take sick days or vacations and stuff like that. And it's also just, you know, let a machine do it. I think that's probably the best way, but it's unique, right? You know, more machines, more expensive systems, more people, less expensive systems. So depending on the client, right, it can work. But these things are usually anywhere between 30 to 150 people at some of these big facilities.
Councilman Smith? Councilmember Smith.
Thank you, Councilmember Lopez. Florian, thank you for that great presentation, and I'm very excited to come for a tour. So thanks for bringing that up, Lisa. I'm curious about compostable food containers, and what do you recommend, and are you thinking about ways that those can be composted? Because, you know, it seems like, you know, like all the healthy food restaurants want to use them, right? Because they're compostable. However, we don't really have a way to recycle them in any way, unless you have a backyard composter, I guess. So do you have a recommendation for what we can do with them, or are you looking at ways to handle them?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. Organics is going to be big in this country, right? They're starting to mandate in every city that if you produce over 2 tons in some states, but now that's even going down to 1 ton of organic waste per week, you have to recycle it. You can no longer send it in landfill, because although we have plenty of landfill space in the United States, people are big on diverting it because they just want to recycle it, right? It just makes better, it makes more sense. A lot of that compost and that organic waste that you're talking about, that can go to what's called waste to energy sites, right? So it's separated from the packaging. The friction of that organic content produces methane. That methane gets converted into, you know, natural gas or electricity or something like quantum biopowers. In Connecticut, they've taken food waste from New York, Massachusetts, and Connecticut, and that facility powers the whole county, and that's just from food waste. So there are some facilities, they're a little bit more niche and unique right now, which will take it. I know I just got a letter in Manhattan about like, there's going to be free organics pickup for me, right? So you're going to start to see those. And what Van Dyke does is we started to sell something called an organics depacker. It takes packaged food, whether it's expired or mislabeled or it didn't pass quality control. We sort of beat it up in a hammer mill. We separate the packaging from the organic slurry. It ends up looking like a brownish like soup. And then we sell that to either a composter, right, who turns that into fertilizer, or to an anaerobic digester, or to like animal feed, right, if it's clean enough. But right, you need programs where someone's going to pick up a unique bin for that. And the other thing is like you need a lot of people to do it. So mandating things and kind of pushing your government officials to be like, hey, we need to pass like a minimum requirement for organics recycling, because the landfill is 25 to either 50% organics. That's what most of a landfill is. So if we're going to divert from a landfill, like that food scraps and the yard waste, like that stuff has energy in it. It has proteins, it has fats, it has lipids. Like there's a better way to do that than put it in a landfill. So we're going to start seeing places that pop up that are going to need to buy equipment from Van Dyke to separate it. But really it's about getting the tonnage there. No one's going to be building these facilities if they only have 10 tons a week. They need like 60 tons a day, right? At least, right? So communities sort of just like recycling need to band together, because on their own, they're too small. But all of Fairfield County could probably produce enough organic food waste where you could send it to a local facility. But right, you need to mandate it, then you need to build it, and then you need to get people to pick it up and send it there.
Yeah, I mean, we're getting there with food waste for sure, because we have our drop-off sites for food scraps. However, it's, you know, it's those, like every time I have one of those compostable containers, you know, I'm like, what do? I have to throw it in the garbage, or
I still want to answer that question, right? Like that is tricky, right? Because if you do have somewhere where you can put like organics waste, like that's where it would go. So, some of that stuff, right? It says like if it has a recycling logo, you should technically be able to recycle it, but it's tricky, right? Like you have a napkin, right? And it is recyclable, but then you're eating with it, you get a little ketchup on it. Now that's not recyclable, right? So a lot of people say, oh, well, it says it's recyclable, but it's like not if you used it, right? So it has to be like clean in some way, right? So that's something important to consider, and sometimes something that is recyclable, depending on how dirty it is, right, then it's not. So people just have to kind of keep in mind that like this thing is turning into a new product. If I contaminate it with all sorts of stuff, right, then it's not. And then for some of those compostable items, right, if you can put it in a organics, you know, sort of spot, then do that. Otherwise, try to recycle, unless it's like a thin film it says it's like compostable, but it's thin film. Like I don't believe that. Right, it's just the thin film. It's great that what the supermarkets are doing. You only see the paper bags. That's a good thing. But one last thing I'll just say about this too, like consumerism is mostly the problem. And this is what I said to Lisa too at our meeting in Norwalk at our offices. Like there are two people that live next to each other. One orders Uber Eats every single day. One, it cooks themselves and is very, you know, conscientious and is very, you know, like uses Tupperware and saves things and cooks one on Sunday and then kind of spreads that out over the week. Those people live next to each other and they pay the same amount of taxes for the waste. While one person is sort of a slob and consumes a lot and one person is not, right? And they're only going to the dump once a week or going to the garbage chute once a week instead of every 2 days. Right? Some people just consume more than others, right? But we have facilities that actually can handle this waste. But if, you know, something too important to consider is like, what is my footprint? Like, how much am I actually taking up myself, right? Like, am I just being wasteful or am I being conscientious with the food that I eat and how resourceful I am?
Thanks.
Councilmember Shanahan?
Yeah, so I just wanted to kind of follow up on Barbara's question, not to go over Florio on this, but because we were part of the people who started the food recycling, just so you know, Barbara, you can definitely put those compostable, you know, paper things and whatnot into our food waste, because our food waste goes up to New Milford. It's a big facility. So you can put in napkins, you can put in shells, you can put in bones, you can put in paper towels, you can put all that stuff into our
Right.
It's not true.
Yeah, I am aware, but what about, you know, like when you go to Whole Foods, for example, and you get a salad that's specifically what I'm talking about.
So that's
those
tricky, right?
plastic
Like,
Those cannot go in the food.
No, those are trickier. They can't go, but
Yeah.
if it's a paper type of product, you can put it.
Yeah.
people always talk about like the pizza box example, right? Like your pizza box is made out of cardboard, but if it gets super greasy on the bottom, right, that's recyclable. But what you do is actually rip off the top because the top's been untouched, right? It's not greasy. It's just made out of cardboard. And then you rip off the top, you put the top in the recycle bin, and you put the bottom, the greasy part into the trash, right? That's something that you can think about that way.
Quick question. Speaking of contamination, do you know what percentage of the city's recyclables are processed successfully without contamination, approximately?
I mean, it's hard to tell, but I would probably say like close to, Are you saying like if it ends up in the right bin, or just like everything?
Everything.
Everything. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'd probably say around like 50%. Maybe,
Okay.
maybe like, because like some stuff just is a recycled product, but the consumer just puts it in the landfill, right? So there's that. If it ends up in the right bin, I'd probably say like some of these sites, they like to get their residue numbers down to like 15%, right? So like
Interesting.
85% of that is getting recycled, right? In some way, shape, or form.
Yeah. And what do you think are-
Glass,
and what do you think
glass
are-
we're counting as recyclable. That's really weighty. That's really heavy. And it sells for not really a high value, but it is recyclable. It doesn't go for -80 out the door. It goes for about 0 out the door. Whereas right, OCC goes out for about 150 per ton out the door.
Right. And so have you noticed any successes in behavioral change when it comes to recycling? To
Yeah,
encourage people to be a bit
I
more.
would pump education to your schools, all right? Like teach kids super young.
Yeah,
These are the
okay.
objects, and like don't make it so complicated, right? It's paper, cardboard, rigid plastics, bottles, and aluminum cans, right? Just one hand, like just drill it into them, because those are just valuable products. Film doesn't go there, right? Stuff that's welded together and glued and this and that doesn't go there, right? Like organics doesn't go there, right? Just having an education campaign is hard. And like we always talk about this in the recycling industry. It's like, well, we could teach up the consumer, but like everyone kind of looks at like that, like an impossible task. Like just make it so crystal clear what it is and send these videos around. Kind of like the other thing I'm noticing is like people are like, oh, I heard it doesn't happen. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like I go to like hundreds of these facilities a year, and I am absolutely sure that it happens, right? Like, and so kind of also just sharing these videos and just letting people know like this is what happens to it. And just when they see it, right, then they understand it. And right, the most important thing you could do that is young people, just so that they understand as they grow older, like how to do it.
Excellent. Thanks. So a quick follow-up. And so have you ever worked, or has Van Dyke Recycle ever partnered with any of the schools, kind of having a tour of the facility?
We've
Anything
done
in
tours.
that sense?
Yeah, we've definitely done tours, and a lot of our facilities will have like an education center, like that photo I showed you of
Right.
Sims. It's a beautiful education center. They do 300,000 kids a year, right? Like they just do an enormous amount, like field trip after field trip. They do work outings, right? So like offices, like older tours, right? Like they do all like they just have a steady, constant stream of tours. There's someone that works there that all they do is tours, right? So encouraging your local place, or maybe funding, an extra $50,000 to build an education center, right? That could be worthwhile, because then you have all the schools in the area continually tour and literally see where their trash goes.
Awesome. Thank you. Councilmember Shanahan.
Yeah, so last night when we had our presentation about our garbage recycling, I think part of it, and Barbara, I'm going to ask you to fact check me on this, but don't we have some of the funds WIN's supposed to spend on education of isn't there an education component to our garbage program with them? So this
Yeah,
sounds like,
that's my recollection.
yeah, I think this is something we could work with Van Dyke on to maybe come up with some, because we should have funds from their facility, and then also what we'd like to do with our own. So Florian, you're going to be hearing from us on education, I think.
Excellent. If anyone has any more questions, we can close the meeting and adjourn, because I know we have the next meeting in 6 minutes. Going once, going twice. Florian, thank you so much. This was very exciting. This was very informative, very insightful. And it's so awesome that it's here in Norwalk.
Yeah.
So as Lisa mentioned, we are going to be in communication to see how we can continually partner in any way that we both possibly can. So thank you very much. If anyone else wants to say anything.
Thank you so much. This was great.
That's good. Yeah, and guys, feel free to email me or call me, right? Like we can always do sorts of stuff. And just touring the facility, but just kind of telling people, like tell your neighbor, tell your friend, right? Like show them the videos that I sent you, right? Like these are real things that happen. And when people throw something in the trash, they really don't have to think about it. And that's also a good thing. Like we're designed to have you not think about it. But when you just are a little bit conscientious of like, this is how this should go, and I dump out my water bottle in here and then throw it in there, right? Like those little things over time by everyone make a huge, huge difference.
Awesome. Florian, thank you so much. Okay. Then
Amazing job. Thank you so much.
Take care, everyone.
can I have a motion
Bye,
to
guys.
adjourn?
Thank
Or do I have?
Motion to
Okay,
adjourn.
there we go. Okay, thank you, Lisa. Okay, thank you so much.
Alrighty, bye, everybody.
Night.
All right, take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.